Good evening, everybody. James Hancock here, back to review episode 6 of season 2 of Legion, an episode called Chapter 14. This is one of those episodes that felt a lot like a 7th inning stretch before the major events to come in the latter part of the season. It was a pretty experimental episode, but sadly did not address the many mysteries that were the cause of such speculation after last week's episode. As much as I absolutely love and adore the show, and as much as I admire Noah Hawley for taking such enormous creative risks, and he is the sole writer on this episode, when people ask, why isn't Legion more popular, I would point to an episode like this where it's clearly written to appeal to the hardcore Legion fanbase, or perhaps just Noah Hawley, but it shouldn't be some grand mystery as to why Legion is not enjoying larger numbers. After last week's episode, I enjoyed reading a lot of the reactions and theories that it sparked, but the topic that seemed to spark the most conversation was the semi-nude body of Aubrey Plaza. But in addition to that lovely piece of eye candy, we also had some interesting theories as to why Farouk might be testing this device on Amy. One of the most compelling theories that I saw was that perhaps Farouk wants to test to see just how well the device works, because he might be using it as a contingency plan in case his plans to be reunited with his body fall through. Perhaps he might want to insert himself back into David, but it definitely makes sense that Farouk would test such a dangerous device before potentially subjecting himself to it. The biggest mystery for me, which sadly was unaddressed in this episode, is what the potential connection might be between Amy and Fukuyama. But the way this episode begins, it's almost like there was a missing episode or a missing piece in between the two. Because this is an episode where we see David exploring several different alternate realities simultaneously. We basically see a world where David and Amy are walking down a variety of different paths that his life might have gone, and we see all the different potential outcomes. But along the way, it's almost as if he's being hunted or stalked by the Shadow King, which makes me think that this episode was perhaps some sort of psychic assault on David by the Shadow King. Perhaps it was a way of trying to fracture David's mind even more so to make him vulnerable. That is pure speculation on my part, because all we know for sure is what the episode presented to us. And it's interesting to see all the different possible outcomes for David's life. In one, we see he's basically a catatonic, bald old man sitting in a wheelchair, looking very much like a befuddled old Professor X. In another outcome, we see him becoming the most wealthy person in the world after having started out as a coffee delivery boy inside the company. We see him as a crazy homeless person. We see him as a meth head. But the one constant in all these alternate timelines, more often than not, is the presence of his sister Amy looking after him. As viewers of Legion, we've all come to expect the unexpected, and oftentimes the show will introduce wild and bizarre scenarios that never really get explained after the fact. But this episode featured one of my favorite scenes of that nature, where a little rat comes out to David on his desk and starts to sing to him. The song is Brian Ferry's Slave to Love, and this is a song that's been used in many movies and many TV shows. My favorite recent use of it might have been in the closing credits for Kingsman: The Secret Service. If you have not seen the movie, I don't want to spoil it, but let's just say the movie ends on a particularly erotic and scandalous and mildly controversial note that I found absolutely hysterical. In any case, I thought the use of that song, both in Kingsman: Secret Service as well as in this episode, was right on the nose. Another scene that I particularly loved in this episode was this gorgeous homage to Stanley Kubrick's adaptation of Clockwork Orange. When I was 17, I discovered this movie on VHS, and basically for an entire summer, I watched the movie basically every night, and I would listen to the soundtrack driving to and from work. But it's the scene early on in the film where we see a homeless person in a tunnel, and in Clockwork Orange, he's drinking and singing and having a fine time when Alex and his three droogs appear at the top of the tunnel with those long menacing shadows, and they come down and they basically beat him within an inch of his life. And a lot of the dialogue from that scene was used in this episode. However, in this case, David's got psychic powers, and he unleashes the wrath and fury of his full telepathic and telekinetic might. It's almost like he's going into like a Dark Phoenix scenario from the comic books, but he just explodes out with all of his power, and all that's left of these four miscreants is just some long, thin shadows where they used to be standing. It was definitely a beautiful little moment. But the reason I started to develop my theory that this is all a ploy by Farouk to try to confuse or befuddle David, there's this bit where David, the multi-billionaire, is sitting there all alone watching an erotic dance. And it almost appears as if Farouk is observing him. And we start to see more and more timelines where David is either being killed or locked away. There's one where he's running around as a crazy homeless person. He's fighting soldiers. He's throwing people around. He's getting attacked by drones on all sides. He's basically outnumbered and outgunned. But right as he's about to really explode and take everybody out, we see him get completely split down the middle by Carrie. But in one of the alternate timelines where David's basically, his powers are kept under wraps by taking a lot of pills, we see that he's kind of befuddled and confused, waiting for his sister to come pick him up. Some cops start to harass him, and David sees that the Shadow King is sitting in the back seat, and it's the big, fat, chubby, terrifying interpretation of the Shadow King. Amy arrives as the cops are trying to arrest him, and they knock her down, which prompts David to go completely berserk. He throws one cop way up into the sky, but the other one, this might be the most grotesque use of telekinesis I've ever seen in film or television, but David basically starts crushing this cop in, almost like a giant hand is squeezing him all sides until he just completely falls to pieces. It was really, really gruesome stuff. But in that timeline, David gets shot dead. So the episode finally comes full circle where we see the timeline that we're most familiar with, where David is dropped off at the insane asylum. It's basically all the events just prior to the first episode of the first season. And then we get this giant highlight reel of the events of the first season, as well as the most recent events in the second season. And it ends with a really mysterious moment with Farouk saying that it is up to David to decide what is real and what is not. And throughout season 2, it's been really interesting to see how Farouk, on one hand, wants to help David reach his full potential, really claiming and taking ownership of his godlike power. But it's hard not to suspect that Farouk is manipulating him to some advantage for the Shadow King. Sadly, we'll have to wait one more week before we get answers to any of our questions, but we do get some interesting hints in the teaser for the next episode where we see David threatening the Shadow King and how he's going to burn his body. We also get this mysterious image where we see Sid with what looked like almost like a little baby growing inside of her head. There's only 5 episodes left to go in this season, so I think we'll start to see the resolution and conclusion of some of these storylines. So while I might have been a little bit frustrated not to have some of our questions answered in this episode, and I definitely missed having a little aside or a little short film narrated by John Hamm. I feel like in season 2, any episode that doesn't have one of those John Hamm essays, I feel like they're holding out on us. And perhaps revisiting this episode, I actually might see more answers than I'm giving this episode credit for. While it didn't necessarily give me the answers that I was craving, who's to say that it didn't give us a whole bunch of information that might seem more relevant and more applicable over the next couple episodes. But I think that's about all I have to say on this particular episode. As always, whatever fan theories you might have, whatever speculation you might be indulging in, definitely send it my way. Or if you have any concrete answers to any of my questions, I would also appreciate that as well. But I hope you enjoyed my little recap and review. Please consider subscribing to my channel. And if you want to talk, you can always find me on Twitter @CoolBrex. But as always, I really appreciate the support from my channel. But more importantly, onwards and upwards.